Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bio. This week I am joined by none other than account manager here at Moja, Ava Hartington.
Hello.
This week we are going behind the scenes of my recent book launch for From Unknown to Unforgettable. And I wanted to bring you on, Ava, because you supported the book launch behind the scenes, and that is something that you are doing for a lot of our clients as well at the moment. So I thought it would be helpful for any listeners that are thinking about doing a book launch or perhaps a different kind of event, and there might be a few ideas that they can take from this conversation. If we go back to the point where we decided to do the book launch, we, as we always do here at Moja, always want to do things straight away and have things done on the day or, literally in the moment. But if you were now, knowing what you know, to go back and someone that's listening is planning their book launch, how far in advance do you think people should be planning for their book launch?
I would say you need at least a solid 3 to 4 months just to make sure you get everything right and you're really strategic with what you're doing. I think with ours, luckily we did have a lot of time to kind of get that in place, because what we did was separate it between pre-launch, during launch and then post-launch. And I think it's really important to make sure you're allocating enough time for each of those because they require different things in each stage.
Absolutely. And when we talk about a launch, it's not necessarily just a launch party. There's so much involved in a launch. So can you talk us through some of the things that you would put into each of those categories? So do we start with pre-launch and think about that? Yeah.
So pre-launch, I think the first thing you're kind of thinking about if you're doing a launch in person is who do you want to be there? You need to make sure the people that you want to be there feel like they're being engaged with and they kind of know what's going on way ahead of time, and you're nurturing that audience. So I think the first thing we sort of did was make sure we've got our newsletter audience. We made sure we were keeping them in the loop. We did a sign-up form online. So it was, we haven't got anything set in stone yet, but we're going to be doing launches. Here are the areas. If you're interested, please sign up. So from that, people kind of going, oh, we know a launch is happening. Then they wanted to stay involved. They wanted to follow you on social media, see what you're up to, look at our page and stay up to date. So I think that's kind of the most important thing in the beginning, is making sure you're keeping people engaged, because you want these people to turn up to your launch, or if you're doing it online or something like that, you want them to be keeping an eye on when the book's coming out. So I think that's the most important thing to start with.
And then what else would you put in that pre-launch bucket? Because when we're talking about a launch, that's all great for the launch party, isn't it? But there's other things that might be going on alongside that.
Social media is a really big one. So again, we didn't have a really set plan on what we were posting, but we knew what sort of things we wanted to talk about at certain times. And then what we did as well was, using the themes of the book, we use that to create a plan of other podcasts. And, so we're going to wider audiences as well. It's not just your audience. We're then thinking, who else would want to hear about this book? So we started doing research into other podcasts where you could go on and do a little bit of a knowledge transfer, really, where you're giving their audience something, which means they want to come back and listen to yours.
Yeah, which was great, because obviously the book is related to this podcast Beyond the Bio. So there was some real synergies straight away there. And I think because we thought about guesting on other podcasts quite early on, it meant we could be fairly strategic around getting those booked in and getting them to come out at a time that would work really well with the book launch as well. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty cool. Another great thing to talk about in that pre-launch phase was identifying some influencers, wasn't it? So key people that we thought might hopefully talk about and share the book. So can you talk us through?
Yeah. So what we did with that, again, with your book, there were so many different elements to it. So it talks about things like networking, social media, things like that. So using those different themes, we identified a list of people, whether they were influencers as in loads of followers on Instagram, or they've got a really engaged audience on LinkedIn or things like that. So we used that to create a list of people that we think would read the book. So we did it through that way. And what we did ahead of time, we created that list. I think you'd reached out to a few of them that you kind of had that relationship with, just to kind of put it on their radar. And then when it came to the book actually being out, we gave it to them ahead of time with a little personalised note saying sort of, you're getting this ahead of time, making them feel a little bit special, a little bit excited about it. Gave them that, and then a lot of them then shared it when it was during launch week, which was so helpful because, again, it was showing it to their audience.
That had a huge impact, and we've still got a couple of people, I think, that are planning to share it. So I'm really excited for that to come as well. So thinking about the actual launch events that we did, so we did one in London and we did one in Newcastle. What do you think worked well with our launch parties?
I think the best thing that we did for the physical launches was all of the different collateral we had. We had so many things where people had something they could take home with them. And think, the book was one. Yeah. But I think also we had the bookmark inside, which was the personalised bookmark. Again, I think something like that, you remember it because it's not just a business card or something like that. It essentially is, but it's linked to the book. It's a little bit more creative. We had that. We had the little QR codes scattered around. So there was a really clear call to action, which is the most important thing with the launch is what do you want out of this launch? Is it for people to buy the book, or is it for them to post about the book, or is it for them to sign up to some sort of mailing list or things like that? So we were really targeted with the launch with, this is what we want you to do. And we also aligned that with our emails that we got going out. So it was, now you're here, we've got an email going out to you, please have a look at it, just to make sure that kind of everyone knew what it was we were hoping would come out of that launch, and everyone followed suit, and it worked really well.
And I think it's really important for anyone listening who's planning their own book launch to think about what those objectives might be. So for us, it was to sell books, although we did give loads of books away throughout the week, in the lead up to the week at the launches. So our call to action was actually to get them to buy the Kindle version, which was part of our launch activity for that week, to reduce it down to 99 pence, which we all know helps to rocket it up the chart. So that works really well. So we gave them the physical copy, and then the call to action was, but hey, you need to buy this for 99p. And we linked it to a charity. So there was an incentive there to support the charity, which was Smart Waste Newcastle, the charity that I chair. So that felt good, I think, to get people to buy it, and we knew that the money was going to that. So for us, it was, how do we get more people to buy the Kindle version so we can push it up the chart, but also we used it to launch Moja Publishing as well. So that was our call to action. So I think in that sense, we definitely achieved both of those. I guess that's another thing to talk about, is that whole pushing it up the chart thing. And that was really good fun, wasn't it?
And I think we knew what we wanted to happen in terms of getting it up in the Amazon bestsellers, but I think neither of us expected it to do as well as it did. In every single category, it got to number one, that was amazing for us.
And it was wild. Yeah. I remember on the Friday, so when we did the launch, we kicked off on the Monday, and we had the party for London on the Monday and the party for Newcastle on the Thursday, and stuff happening all throughout that week. So I remember the Wednesday, I did a radio interview and I spoke in a couple of memberships. There was quite a lot of kind of media type stuff going on the Wednesday. So there was activities happening every day. But I remember on the Friday being at a charity lunch and kind of refreshing the Amazon page and going, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like we were
just checking it, texting
we were
each
texting
other.
like, oh my God, I can't believe it. It's hit this. So I guess to put it into context, you don't need to sell loads of copies to get to number one in an obscure chart. However, in the overall chart, it's quite hard to get up there. And I guess to give another example, this is my third book. So with the first two, I could probably look it up and work out what it was. But I remember with the first two, I think the peak position that I got was, I can't remember if it was the same for both books or what, but I remember being around the 600 mark in the Kindle chart for probably both books at one point. And that was peak position. So number 600-ish in the whole Kindle chart.
Of the Kindle chart, yeah.
But at that point, it was still number one in its respective category. So that was pretty cool. With this book, the peak position was number 75 in the whole chart. Like, that was
that is, and we were looking at the sort of people that were, you were on top of or just underneath on the list, and they were massive celebrities or famous authors, and I think that was just, it was crazy.
It was crazy. And because Moja Publishing have published this book, and because we've done it across all formats this time with Kindle, paperback and audiobook, we see the back end as well. So I suppose if we were to try and put some numbers around what got it to number 75, which is probably useful information for any aspiring authors listening, I remember that we sold, I think it was about 400 or 500 books across those formats on that peak day.
Yeah.
So it's probably around 500, I would say, across those 3 formats on that Friday. And that was what kind of gave it that huge boost. But yeah, I mean, that was exciting.
It was, and I think for anyone that would be looking to publish their own or anything like that, what we realised with the 99p Kindle deal, that we did it over the week because we had multiple launch events. But if you only have one, you don't need it to be 5 days because you want it to be as concentrated as possible. That sort of sense of urgency where it's, oh, I've only got 12 hours to get it for 99p. That is the most important thing to do.
I think that's really good advice, because the reality is you're probably not going to get many more extra sales at that 99 pence. So if you can have it as a shorter time, and I think 48 hours is that 2-day window is kind of the best guidance, because then it's all that concentrated efforts, like you say. And sometimes I remember with my second book, Amazon put it into some quite challenging categories. And is that still the case? Do Amazon decide the categories?
So you decide them yourself.
All right. Okay.
So what we did with yours was we had some quite general ones, and then we had some more specific ones. So then you've kind of, obviously for you, this is your third book, whereas for people who maybe are starting out, it is quite good to have obscure categories, because then you've got more of a chance to go up the ranks in those. And I think that's with us, where we had the really general categories to get to number one in those, where it's business books or something like that. That's a real achievement. So I think it's really important for anyone to mix up the categories. So you've got, obviously make them relevant. Don't just put something that's not linked to your book at all, but to have some that are quite general and have some that are really targeted, so that you've got more of a chance of being a bestseller in one of the categories at least.
That's really solid advice, because I remember for the first 2 that you didn't have as much control with Amazon, and they just put you in categories. And I remember thinking that some of the categories they'd put me in weren't relevant, and I couldn't understand why they'd done that. And also I remember panicking with the second book, thinking, oh my God, they've put me in such a difficult category. I'm never going to get there. But I did get there. But this one was a lot easier for sure, because it was literally just across the board, and you end up in loads of random other categories as well, just because it's doing so well. So yeah, I mean, it was certainly an exciting week. That's for sure. Now that we're kind of thinking about that pre-launch piece and the launch week itself, are there any things that you would do differently, or that you're advising our clients to do differently?
I can't think of anything that we didn't get right. I think there's a lot that I think went so well. 100%, I would always recommend that to our clients. I think the best one for both of our launches was having the guest speakers. So obviously having Linda Plant she's just fabulous, isn't she? She's and I think in terms of an actual launch, what you're doing on the day or on the night is to be really structured with what you're doing, and making sure that the people that are there, they're enjoying it, and there's something for them to do or to look forward to. Anything where they can take photos and get content. We had loads of people making reels just off their own back, because it was, a great venue and things like that. In the Newcastle launch, we had the specific cocktails that we designed that were named the Milliken.
That was fun.
That was everyone's favourite as well. Yeah. So I think it's just sort of things like that where you kind of, at the end of the day, your launch is to celebrate you and your book, but you want people there to kind of have a good time and want to talk about it. And we still have people now talking about the launches, and they were back in, 2 months ago now? So I think it's just, I can't really think of anything that we didn't get right. I'm not sure if you can, where you think for future people maybe to avoid it.
I think in hindsight, I would have had the Newcastle and the London launches closer together. And the reason why we had them when we had them was partly linked to cost, because a venue in London is expensive.
It's pricey.
Yeah. And also at one point we were thinking about doing a Manchester launch as well. And we did something, I did that literary lunch in Manchester a few weeks back, which kind of took the place of doing the Manchester launch, I guess. So I suppose in hindsight, I probably would have had all of those in the same week. But that said, I remember thinking that week, if we'd done Manchester as well, we would have knackered.
Yeah, I think obviously with Newcastle, that was our last leg of the tour. I think if you'd have done Manchester as well, I don't think you would have been your best self for Newcastle.
Fair.
And I think you've got to be fair and make sure everyone's having the same experience regardless of where they are. So I think we got it right just doing 2 locations. But yeah, if we could have done them closer together, I think it probably would have been
a little higher up the chart, possibly, but who knows. But yeah, that's useful reflection. So think about that post-launch phase. What sorts of activities would you have in there?
So what we'd done, that was the one bit in terms of social media where it was really quite structured, and it was, we need to make sure that you know, the next day we're talking about the event. Everyone who's came feels like we've appreciated them coming. We got all of the photos out, you know, the photographer with the photos. I was on my laptop getting those ready to go. They came in probably an hour before I got them out. And I think things like that was just making sure, again, that we're kind of talking about what it was. We thanked all of the sponsors and things like that. And I think the most important point after was making sure we're maintaining that momentum. So we're still talking about it and we're still sharing links and things like that. I think that was probably the most important.
Yeah, I think so. Keeping the conversation going, making sure that it's easy for people to share. And I think it certainly felt like social media was flooded that week.
Yeah, it was crazy. Trying to keep up with everything as well. Trying to make sure I'm liking, commenting on everything. It was.
Yeah, another reason why it's good to kind of have that sort of concentrated time, I guess. So obviously we've wrapped up the launch for that book, but we're working with clients at the moment looking at their launches. Have you got any thoughts around things that other people are doing that you think look good? Because I know we've got our client Louise's book coming out in a few weeks from now, and she's going to do hers as a brunch.
Yeah, so what I love with Louise, and I think as well, Louise's book, when it comes out, obviously we can talk more about it and share everything, but it's a really special book and it's all about forming connections as women and sharing your stories. So for Louise, she didn't want a big bash with loads of people. She wanted a really intimate affair with people around her that are really important to her. So that's what she's done. So we've organised a brunch. So it's really a select few people that are going, where she can just talk to those people and talk about the book. And it's, for her, I think, it's her first book. I don't think it's kind of she wanted a party or anything like that. It's more that all of those people there are people who really care about her. They're really important women in her life. Some of them have written parts for her book. So she's doing the same sort of thing that we did for yours in terms of having a sort of a goodie bag, something to take home, but it's a little bit more intimate than that. So I think it doesn't have to be a massive party to be a successful launch, and she will have 50 women in that room who will want to get it for 99p because she's going to do a free book for them as well and give them the 99p deal and advertise that, and she will still do really well doing it in that way. And I think it's just, you have to kind of think about what it is you want from your launch, because if you want it to be this massive party, then that's fine, but then you're going to have a different results depending on what it is.
Yeah, and it's important that it's in line with the book, right?
Yeah.
So if we think about Hannah Harvey's recent book launch, her book is called How to Divorce Sober. And tell us about her party, her event.
Hers was great. So she had hers at a bookshop, and again, it was quite an intimate affair. And the reason she wrote that book is due to Katie, who's her podcast co-host, who kind of pushed her to do it. So they did a live interview where it was a podcast recording, which you can now listen to. So if you didn't come, you can listen to it and see.
Pop a link in the show notes.
And what was really brilliant is with Hannah, obviously she's discovered sobriety and she's really into her health and wellness and everything like that. So at the event, there was only alcohol-free drinks. So we were loving the no Zecco.
Yeah.
We were loving that. So I think it was really in line with her, and especially even the bookshop. She's got a connection to that bookshop and things like that. And it felt really Hannah, which I think was the most important thing. And she had a great night, and so did we.
Yeah. And no hangovers the next morning.
Yeah, exactly. I felt really fresh, yeah.
Bonus. Cool. Okay, so I think we've probably covered quite a bit there in terms of things that we've tried, things that we've seen our clients do, and hopefully anyone listening will have got some ideas from that. So if anyone is listening who has a book coming out or wants some help with writing that book, please do get in touch with Ava or I, and we would be glad.
We would love to help you.
We would. We absolutely would. Thanks for being on Beyond the Bio.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you're serious about growing your profile, take our free profile assessment quiz to see where you're at right now and get hints and tips on how to improve your score. You'll find the link to the quiz in the show notes. If you've enjoyed the episode, it would be mint if you'd subscribe, like, and leave a review. See you next Monday.